things that a lot of people are interested in on that national level.
Yeah, big. That's the wind that we have an opening.
Challenges still, but there is an opening, and
Mhm.
so I'm not sure if anyone's a Dumb and Dumber fan, but the movie. But as I said, there is a chance.
Hmm.
So that's exciting.
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Portlock.
Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good to
How
see
are
you.
you? Good to see you. I can't tell you how almost every single time I talk to somebody at Capitol Hill Day, they talk about the wonderful presentation you gave
Wow.
and how they want you back so badly.
Well,
Lisa's,
I was honored to just be there. Yeah,
Lisa
it was a good
Summers,
good visit.
who organizes all of sort of a lot of the extracurricular learning events.
Hmm.
She and I went to the same school, not at the same time, but she and I went to the same school in Chicago.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I talked to her quite a bit, and so she's just in awe of you and all that you've done. So that's been
Yeah,
great.
had a real great visit. Yes.
It was good. Good.
Yeah.
I know the kids got a lot out of it. So I can't wait till my son or John and my son Grant is old enough to participate in stuff like that. It'll be
Yeah.
great.
Well, I'm gonna hang around long enough. So
Oh, I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to that.
yeah, because I've reached the point I take each day as a blessing after 79 years.
No, I
Oh
get it.
yeah,
I have a mother who's turning 79 and a father who's turning
okay,
80. So I get it.
that's it.
Yep.
And I
Well,
think
thank you for doing this tonight. I appreciate it.
sure. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
So I think John said it before, but we are competing with a few things, but we're going to get started momentarily. And for those that don't know, we have a membership base of almost 3,000 individuals that we send emails out to. So this is going to be recorded. It's going to be sent out to our membership on our social media. So it's going to have ways to live on forever. So just putting that out there as well.
Sure.
Give it a couple more minutes.
Hmm.
Okay. So John, I think we're just waiting for one more panelist, right?
I think
We
it's
are. We're waiting on the mayor, and I see Linda Jefferson is on, so I'm assuming that the mayor will be on soon as well.
Okay. Hey Linda, how you doing? So,
Hello?
John, yeah, hello.
Hi, this is Sharon Pratt. Yes, I could, please resend the hyperlinks of the Zoom because I'm calling because the hyperlink didn't work.
Oh, okay. My apologies, Mayor Pratt. Let me,
Yeah,
I'll get Sean Sullivan to send that over right now to
I'll
you.
do that.
yeah. Thank you,
Okay,
Sean.
thanks.
Mayor, I sent it. I just resent it as well. So, but we'll see if Sean can.
Okay, you did resend it? Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, I'll look for it because I went to the flyer and it wasn't working.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I sent it as a discrete link, and you may have to just like click on it and then click on it twice. But if you have a problem, then we'll make sure Sean sends it.
Okay, and you sent it to which one of the accounts? So I don't see it.
I sent it to your consulting account.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it'll come through. I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm sure I will.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to have this right as best as possible to begin. So we'll wait a few more minutes to see if it comes through. But just for confirmation, could you just state your email address again? So Sean, just in case.
Yes. Why don't you do this one? It's easy. Sharon, SHARON .Pratt @udc.edu. That's Sharon Pratt PRATT @udc.edu.
Okay.
And it just came through, I think. Okay, let's see. And hit where it says Ward 5 Democrats.
Yes, ma'am. If
Yes.
you click on that,
I got it. Okay, I think I'm coming in now. I'm here.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. I can hang up the phone.
Yes, please do.
All right. Okay, John. I think we could go ahead and now that the mayor is here, you could go ahead and get started. John, you could, whenever you feel comfortable, you could take it away.
all right, great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And I know we'll have more joining in as we go on with the evening. But we do want to get started. My name is John Lucio. I'm with the Ward 5 Democrats, and I'm going to be one of your moderators this evening. I'm going to be joined by the chairman of the Ward 5 Democrats, Gordon Andrew Fletcher, whom I think all of you know already. He's going to say a couple words in a few minutes, but I just wanted to get things started. Before we begin, I know there's some of us on here, maybe we've already done that, but or we've already done this, but let's just all with me. Let's just take one big inhale and an exhale. We made it. We made it through a pretty tumultuous 2020. We've rounded the year into 2021. And so there's some things to be celebrated, but a lot of threats in 2020, both the health and in politics. Unfortunately, many of our friends and family and neighbors weren't able to be as fortunate as we are around the year, and for various reasons. So if we can just take just 2 seconds, and probably literally 2 seconds, community violence, community police violence, the health pandemic, just take a few seconds of a moment of silence just to kind of honor and remember that we're fortunate to be here and we've made it. But there are others that are vulnerable that weren't able to make it and are still vulnerable. So if we can just remember those, so if we can just take just a second of some silence. Thank you for the indulgence there. One of the most overused cliches of 2020 was that this is the most pivotal election that we may face in our lifetime. And you know, I say overused, and I say that almost flippantly, because it really isn't hyperbolic. It really was a very pivotal election. And now that we're through with the 2020 election, there are a lot of implications and things that we need to think about. What we just went through, what we just witnessed, and what it might mean, and how do we learn from that? What do we take from that? And what are those lessons that we might have going forward into the future? And so that's really why we're here, is to think about the implications, kind of dissect, analyze, maybe have some fun, prognosticate, a lot of prognostication, a lot of, we got a 50-50 shot of being right at some of these things that we're going to talk about today. But it was really just an opportunity to chat and share with our constituency, some of your thoughts as experts in the field, and those that are tracking it, living it, experiencing it over a lifetime for most of you, all of you. And that's really the purpose of why we're putting this together today. This is going to be recorded. Hopefully that's not a problem, because we do want to post this, and we do get a lot of people that will view this afterwards that are committed to other events at the moment. Before we start or go any further, I do want to allow the chairman and my co-moderator to say a few words, and we'll start getting some things kicked off.
Okay, great. Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. And again, my name is Gordon Andrew Fletcher. I have the honor and privilege of serving as chair of the Ward 5 Democrats. The Ward 5 Democrats, we want to always be in a posture of education. We would like to educate both Democrats and all residents of Ward 5 to the best of our ability, and all residents around the District of Columbia. We've held various forums throughout this term under the support and supervision of John Lucio, who's the Issues and Programs Chair. And so it takes a team, a family, to do the work that we're doing. I'm very proud to say we are the most diverse ward Democratic organization in the city. And I say that based upon age, race, gender, sexual orientation, and Washingtonian versus non-native Washingtonian. So we come with a lot of wealth of experience and collective knowledge and just energy around Ward 5 Democrats. I want to make sure I also recognize the first vice chair, Emily Lucio, second vice chair, Jataris Frazier, committee chairs. We have our MVP of the Ward 5 Democrats on the line as well, the seniors committee chair, Mr. Bob King. And without reiterating things that John said, this is a very unprecedented time that we're living in. And, after the elections that we've had both nationally and locally, we need to hear from experts. We need to hear from those from the field that can provide analysis on both the local and national level. And that's why we have you here. And I just want to say thank you to the panelists. You're the reason why this event is being able to come to fruition. So thank you very much. And, I look to have a robust discussion, a very worthwhile discussion about a lot of different topics. And respect is the number one thing here at all times. And so without any further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce the panelists. And I would like to start with introducing and welcoming former Mayor Sharon Pratt. She is the founding director of the UDC Center for Politics. Next, and after I list all the panelists, I want to give everyone a brief opportunity to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to turn it back over to John, and John will start the questions from there. So next, after former Mayor Sharon Pratt, we have Dr. Michael Fontroy, professor with Howard University. And I'm going to take a little point of privilege. And for anyone else that is of this, let me know. I think it's amazing that we have Kamala Harris, who is a member of a Black Greek letter organization. And I think that's something that we should always highlight, not too much, but at least recognize it. And so Michael Fontroy also happens to be my fraternity brother, a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. So I also just want to recognize that. Next, we have Mr. John Rodriguez. the senior political analyst for El Tiempo Latino. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Thereafter, we have Mr. Larry Miller. Welcome back. Mr. Miller, thank you for being with us again. Really appreciate your time, because we know it's very, very important. He's an anchor with USA 9. And last but certainly not least, our very own, and he's not the only Ward 5, native Ward 5 resident here, because we also have Dr. Michael Fontroy, but Dr. Fontroy, Phil Portlock is, we like to call him one of the historians in Ward 5. So we're glad to have him. Emily Lucio made sure that we brought Phil Portlock here. So Phil, welcome. And without further ado, I want to pass it to Mayor Sharon Pratt to give some introductions, and everyone else, the other panelists, can do so. And then hand it back over to John, and we'll get this going. Thank you all.
Mayor Pratt, you can unmute yourself in the bottom left-hand corner with the microphone symbol.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm Sharon Pratt. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I'm also from Washington, D.C., and I won't go on and on about the sorority, but I also feel that allegiance to Howard. So I think it's very appropriate to have a gathering to talk about this election year, because though one might want to suggest that it's been overplayed, that this was such a significant consequential election, I for one think, and I've lived probably the longest of almost anyone on this panel, I do think it was. I think it was very consequential. I think we are at some extraordinary inflection points in our country. And I think a lot is hanging in the balance, along with some pretty obvious issues. We've seen about racial justice. We've seen it about a pandemic. We know about it in climate change. But after what happened on January 6th, I think we need to be concerned about our ability to hang on to our democracy. Because 45% of the Republicans, 45% supported, not Donald Trump, the siege of the Capitol. That is an extraordinary number of fellow Americans who actually support what happened on January 6th. So I think it's appropriate that we have this conversation, because a lot hangs in the balance.
So let me say thank you to you all for the invitation. While I no longer live in Ward 4, from Ward 5, I live in Ward 4. Ward 5 is my home ward. My mom still lives there, so I'm there regularly. Bunker Hill, Bacchus Junior High School, so on and so forth. The first McDonald's I ever went to was the one on South Dakota Avenue. So anyway, Ward 5 is really big to me, and I'm always available. I'm always willing to join if I can fit it in, so thank you. I want to underline one thing that Mayor Pratt said, and it's always great to be with her in these kinds of conversations. So this is an unusual time, and it's never too soon to do a review and a sort of preview, which today should be about. But for some of us watching what happened on January 6th really does sort of crystallize what we're dealing with in this city and around the country. Many of us have personal stories about the Hill. My first real job was a summer job pulling weeds on the Hill and emptying trash the summer between my 10th and 11th grade year. I did internships on the Hill and met my wife there, and my uncles represented DC in Congress for 20 years. And so if some of you all can see that license plate back there, that's the one that he first got when he was in Congress. And he gave it to my grandparents, and I may or may not have snuck it out of the house at one point, but this is all really special for me. And so as we reflect on January 6th, the November election, and all that that may or may not mean for the city, I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Hello, thank you for having me as well. My name is John Rodriguez. I'm the former Vice President of DC Latino Caucus and also now a board member, and I serve as their public relations chair. By trade, I'm a political consultant, run political campaigns all across the country, from the federal level for the presidential and down to local races, and actually had a stake in it in this last November election, both on the federal level and here locally in Washington, D.C. in the at-large race. That notwithstanding, although we had the idea of talking about a post-election kind of analysis, you can't help but to think, exactly how the environment has been changed and impacted by kind of these external forces, whether that be health or this new political ideologies that we've been affected by from our president. So, I hope that this discussion can help us orient ourselves into what we can do future coming, and bring my political knowledge, but also my community organizing background to be able to kind of think about what can be done to empower our local community in having a say and creating that kind of influence that will be hopefully transformative come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Mr. Miller, do you want to?
Sorry about that. Yeah, my internet for some reason is acting a little wonky, so we'll try to adjust accordingly. My name is Larry Miller. I'm a news anchor for WUSA 9. I'm on 12 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, all that jazz. Grew up in Virginia Beach, raised in Baltimore, went to school in Pittsburgh, been in DC now for about going on 6 years for my first tour here. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Certainly lots to talk about, even some developments that we've seen take place just earlier this afternoon. So I look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Portlock.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm just honored to be here with each of you and hope I can impart something here tonight. But I'm a native Washingtonian and born in Northwest Washington, Garfield Hospital. And I attended Dunbar High School, class of '59, with our former mayor, Vince Gray. We grew up together, played ball, softball, baseball, football, everything. So just had to put that out. And I started my social justice journey in 1968 when I had a chance to go to see Dr. King give his last Sunday sermon here at the Washington Cathedral. That was on March the 31st, 1968. And in my other presentations, I stretch it out a little bit, but I will just have to say, in keeping this short, after seeing him and listening to him give this sermon, remaining awoke during a great revolution, 5 days later, he was gone. And I can't tell you, even when I say this many years later, I almost want to tear up because I was 26 years old. And to get the word that this man was gone and the way he died, I was angry, I was sad, it was just a terrible time. And of course, many urban areas went up in smoke. I had just gotten my camera, so I had that camera. I couldn't go out because the curfew was put in pretty quickly. So I decided to hold off until Saturday, the 6th of April. And I spent at least 5 hours walking around this city, my city, to see just what it looked like, to talk with people, and to just get a feel with that what was happening. And one of my driving thoughts was, is this going to be the way this country is going to solve its differences? Is it going to be the taking of life? I didn't know. So I finished up shooting and I ran to my favorite refuge, the National Arboretum. And I spent 3 hours there just reflecting, taking pictures. And then I made a decision. I looked at my camera, which I had had a year, and I said, buddy, we're going to find a way to use this camera for me to communicate and to focus on some of the issues that are facing this country, and particularly where African Americans were concerned. So after that, I got involved with the Poor People's Campaign, Resurrection City, the Free South Africa movement, got arrested. And it's just been over 52 years of work, commitment, where this whole issue of social justice is concerned. And I tell folks now, I may be 79, but my spirit is still almost as if it was when I was 26 years old. And I hope to continue this work for as long as I can, because it's a never ending work. It's a never ending work. And I'm just happy to be here tonight. And again, I'm just looking forward to hear what each of us has to say, and that we can take this and have a call to action after this meeting. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to get into questions here in a second, but if it's all right, I'm just going to do a CNN version of setting the scene of the 2020.
Wait, John, sorry, one thing before we go there, I just want to be respectful. We have just been joined by the DC Democratic Party Chairman, Mr. Charles Wilson. And so I want to make sure that we recognize our chair and just give him an opportunity to say a few words. Mr. Chair, you see, we have an amazing panel here. So, you know, I'm glad that you're able to take some time out to come spend some time with the Ward 5 Democrats. So, Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Fletcher. I see you have the who's who of DC politics on the call. So I'm going to take a step back and listen to what everybody has to say. But I did want to say, first of all, congratulations to everyone who made phone calls, who sent text messages down to Georgia to be able to flip that state for us. Those 2 Senate votes mean a whole lot. So if you played any role in doing that, pat yourself on the back, because you deserve as much applause as anyone else. I know the Ward 5 Dems will announce our virtual inaugural event next Friday. We're going to have the who's who of DC politics on that call, along with several performers and musical artists. So stay tuned and just continue to stay connected to us through the Ward 5 Democrats. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, back to you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you so much for joining, Chairman Wilson. So real quick, what I was saying before, we're gonna get into questions here in a second, and this is, you know, I'm kind of giddy because it's hard to say Zoom is an intimate setting, but you're picking the brains of some of the most influential and experienced people in the city. You know, do this in this intimate setting is just fantastic. But let me just set the scene of the 2020 elections real quick in a CNN version. You know, the DC count, the 2020 elections resulted in a DC council that's a membership of a majority of women for the first time since 1998, and a majority African American since the first time in 2012. And oh yeah, by the way, the House, Senate, and President are all Democrats. So that's, as we're going through these questions, kind of think about that in the frame of how you might respond. We're going to start with, it's not an elephant in the room by any means, but the thing that's on everybody's mind since last Tuesday's maybe surprising victory of 2 Georgia senators, and that's DC statehood. This one's kind of to everybody, so give me, if you don't mind, give us your perspective on the thoughts on DC statehood, what that means, how likely it is that we can achieve statehood, and then if not, how do we elevate this issue to a more of a national stage if that's what we need to do. Mayor, if you don't mind starting.
No, I think we've got to go for broke. We don't often have the Senate, the House, and the President. And I think we've got to go for broke. I think we've got a good shot. why do I think we have a good shot? Now we've got to make it so that it has currency, it resonates with the needs of individuals in their own world, in their own states. I do think, however, to put it in the context of an environment of racial injustice is a good one. The mayor did a piece, I think, in the Post, tying it to the Black Lives Matter movement. And the reason that's relevant is that I don't know how many people know that this capital was chosen entirely as a gesture to preserve slavery, because the obvious choice at the time of the formation of the country was something, for example, New York, where the oath of office was administered to George Washington, which was the commercial center of America, or Philadelphia, which had been the home of the Continental Congress, the largest city in the Union at the time. There were over 30 plus choices, but they chose something that was nothing. Entirely a deal cut by Jefferson, Hamilton, and Madison in order for Hamilton to get the votes for, for them assuming the Revolutionary War debt of states, which New York, his home, had the greatest share because that's where most of the fighting occurred. He had to cut a deal to make a gesture that the capital wouldn't be in some place like Pennsylvania where you had a strong abolitionist movement. It was entirely a gesture. So the conflict of who we are as a country, the original sin that we had as a country, is embodied in the very choice of the capital. And so that's a narrative that has power in 2021. And I think also to speak to some of the issues that matter, particularly to Democrats across the country, be it climate change and the like, the ability to ensure that having those two additional, at least progressive votes, we could call it, I think gives it a lot of power. So I think we have a shot. I think we've got to be very focused and tenacious about it. But I think we've got to go for it and put pressure on Schumer and all of them that said they were on board. Show me with your vote. And I think the mayor's view of just go ahead, carve out the federal enclave. Let's not argue about that. Let's just make it a state and have the votes the way you brought in Tennessee. I think we've got to go for it, and I think we can win it.
And this is Phil Portlock. I just wanted to mention something that we've attempted to do in August with this election. We decided to take our presentation, voting rights, a struggle to be counted. That was created by my wife and I back in 2013 when the Supreme Court struck down two major clauses of that historic 65 Voting Rights Act. We had conducted about 29 vigils in front of that court between April of that year and June 25th when that decision came down. We were mad as hell. That's to say it mildly. So we came home and we said, we're ticked, but we're going to be strategic. God has given me the photography skill, the writing, and the history background. And we sat down and we put a documentary together as a response to that decision. And we've been sharing that to all over the place. I'm not even here, other cities. But when the pandemic came, we didn't know what we were going to do. So we have started doing this on Zoom. We started doing voter education seminars on Sunday, starting on Sunday, August the 2nd. And in that time, we did about 35 seminars. We were able to reach folks in Florida, folks in California, all over the place. And this is how it ties in with statehood. As a part of our presentation, we also talk about the struggle that we in the district have been going through historically to gain the representation that we deserve. And to say it mildly, many folks did not know what this struggle was about. They didn't even know it existed. So I think I can't count the thousands, but I would just say with the schools and all universities, I think we have several folks who didn't know about this struggle that know about it now. And hopefully we have asked them and to pledge to get the word out to your family, to your city, your colleges, your universities, because this is something that has to happen. And that's, I wanted to throw that out because we are going to have many ways, and we have to find many ways to get that message out, that we are not going to continue to just be second-class citizens in this country, that we pay all these taxes, we go to these wars, we serve on these juries. Enough is enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Fontra, I think you were going to say
Yeah,
something.
I just want to say, I think we're better positioned now than we've been in years. And, you know, like Haley's comment, sometimes these opportunities come around very infrequently. And if we're going to, you know, to use Mayor Pratt's word, if we're going to go for it, I think we need to, and I think we should. We have a lot of work to do. The education piece is important. When you explain it to people in a one-on-one setting or a small group setting, and I do this whenever I'm engaged in speaking, when I'm involved in speaking engagements around the country, I make it a point to include a small bit about being from DC and what that means relative to the people who are in the room, wherever I am around the country. And it doesn't take long for it to make a whole lot of sense to people that it's wrong and it needs to be fixed. And I think so the theoretical piece to that is there. Reasonable people get it and get it quickly. But there's an intersection of theory and practice, right? And the concern that we need to be prepared to address is around the raw naked politics of this. You got to get the votes in the Senate. And some of us remember what happened in 1993 in the House. We had a Democratic House, Senate, and President who put the no taxation without representation tag on the White House limousine. But when it came down to it, some of our Democratic friends let us down. And so we need to keep that in mind too, that as we go forward, we need to help to create a scenario in which Democratic friends are ready and able to go to the mat on it. And we have to, you know, cajole certain Republicans and other people we need to put in a position where they can't vote no. And so that's where the practice sort of is engaged. And I think one of the roadmaps could be seen last in the Georgia primary, the Georgia runoffs, and the work that grassroots organizing did to help make that happen. I think a similar version of that, wherever it is around the country, has to include a slice on DC statehood, because the organizing comes along with the education, the one-on-one interaction, because it's going to be difficult to get Republicans to vote to dilute their own voting power in the Senate. But I think that reasonable people can come to understand that there's certain things that are beyond just partisanship. And of course, I think DC statehood is certainly one of those things.
That's awesome. Dr. Fontre, let me ask you, and then Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Miller, you follow up with the same sort of sub question. Is it possible without filibuster reform? Because it's not simply in the Senate a 50+1. And so what's your thoughts on the prospect of that?
Well, if we're continuing to exist in a filibuster environment, then I think we're in a very difficult strait, because there'll be somebody who's prepared to go to the war, go to the mat on it. You know, if cloture rules are changed and you maybe reduce the number of votes that are required, you know, that preserves the right for the minority to have some leverage, but at the same time could make it more difficult. You know, some of those Senate seats that didn't come across the line last November that were expected to, Maine, for example, is a really big one. I think an opportunity was missed to pick up 1, 2, or 3 seats that could have extended the bridge a bit in the Senate. But yeah, you're going to need rule changes, and unfortunately, I think all of 2021 is going to be dedicated to coronavirus vaccines, repairing the economy, and then this unexpected sort of insurrection and all of the investigations and impeachment trials and all of that that's going to have to come forward. We don't even know what we don't know yet. And so the dance card, if you will, of items that will have to be addressed next year is going to be longer than we thought. And that's possible, that could potentially impact where statehood falls in line of the menu of options.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
I'd like
just
to,
kind of adding to that, you know, I will say that there does not seem to be at least any indication right now that statehood is a top priority for the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, understanding that they have a tremendous amount of work that they'll be having to deal with. One, because they're putting out a lot of fires left and right from the previous administration, and then also trying to quell, which something that we've seen for at least the past 8 years is this rising racial tide that is really starting to show itself and has shown itself at the Capitol just last week. So I think if anything, I think the mayor has certainly kind of put statehood at the forefront in her comments regarding the insurrection at the Capitol. It will be interesting to see what the Biden-Harris administration feels about that in terms of priority issues, because conceivably they have really the first 2 years to kind of get something like that done. So if that's going to get done, it has to get done within the next 2 years, at least at that point. And there hasn't been any indication yet that that is a top priority issue, and whether or not they have started the ground game to kind of lay out a potential vote on that. So I think at this point, while it's not inconceivable, it's a bit hard to imagine because it just seems like the nuts and bolts of it aren't there at this point.
yeah, I'd like to dovetail on that.
Yep, please, John.
The other side of what we're experiencing is the lack of resource during the pandemic, and the position that the district is in, like other territories, it puts us at a tremendous disadvantage, like hundreds of millions of dollars of a disadvantage. I think that, given the reality of where folks are suffering, that alone should be reason enough to really look at how to advance statehood, just so that you can quell some of the inequities that you have by not being a state, but especially during this time when it's so difficult, and we're not being able to support the district from the federal level as it should. But beyond that, and from a technical standpoint and a political standpoint, there is a way to be able to move folks towards our way. And one was mentioned before in terms of advertising or messaging and getting the word out. That has to come with a robust investment, both from all parties that want to support and see this change. From the community standpoint, Stacey Abrams and the voting organization success was due to major donations in doing that work. So it has to come with some financial backing, but also we need to be putting pressure on the folks that are in the position to move towards our way, some of the senators that are in the middle, and to secure those votes. And along with that, public education, continuing building that relationship with their office and being very sure that they understand that their vote is dependent on their future support, or maybe future denouncement, whether that be by commercial or what have you, mail. But those are the things that are at our disposal to be able to get people to think about and to get our electeds to move towards our way.
This is Phil again. I wanted to mention the importance of finding out as soon as we can who are on these committees, particularly the judiciary committees in the House and in the Senate. And the other thing, with all that's happening with us not being able to call the National Guard up and protect ourselves, because with these groups coming back, they say they're coming back. So we can count that they're coming back. I don't know in what form, but in some ways we'll be ready for them, but it doesn't change the power that our mayor has to be able to say, we don't need them here. We need to have our own. In other words, if we can emphasize more and more, because when a crisis happens, it really can be a teachable moment, because it gives us opportunities to see certain things, just like this whole wealth disparity made it crystal clear during our pandemic. We saw, we knew as a people how many Blacks were suffering percentage wise, but this thing hit the whole country because people wanted to ignore it, or they just didn't see it. So I'm still hopeful that this window of opportunity is there, and being a voter advocate, we cannot even listen to the media talking about there's an assumption that the House is going to go back over to the Republicans in 2022. I
And
just say,
Phil,
hell no.
and Phil, if I could just chime in there, I agree with you stating that, what happened last week is the number one reason why we need DC statehood. However, I think Larry also, made a point that is very relevant, that, this may not be a priority for the Biden administration. I believe the highest ranking African American Black person in the Biden administration is Cedric Richmond, and he was on CNN yesterday. He made no mention of DC statehood. Talked about a plethora of things, and DC statehood was not on there. However, I want to take it from national down to local, and then I'm gonna let John go back. We're gonna keep tag teaming this. So with that being said, I want to go local. I want to go back to you, Mayor Sharon Pratt. Mayor Pratt, John talked about this earlier. The fact that the makeup of the council has shifted in a remarkable way. And, based upon your knowledge, your experience, do you have any insight into any council priorities, or whether the makeup of the current council has any specific implications? Definitely want to hear from you about this first and foremost, please.
Well, I'm not certain. Do I think it has implications? I think it's always refreshing when, to see so many women elected. I think that's encouraging. And but in terms of what that portends, well, it certainly portends or suggests that what we think is a progressive community is continuing to be a progressive community, and trying to be reflective, or more naturally reflective of our constituent interest. I do want to still come back to the issue of statehood. One reason we don't have it, it's sort of like, Michael, when your uncle was so valiant in pushing for even home rule, it was always considered sort of like an absurdity. That's not something we have time for. We have to do this, that, and the other. That's so ridiculous. Certainly when I was in office, anytime I brought up statehood to the point of ad nauseum, everyone suggested it was always, really not that relevant. We've got to make it relevant. It's absurd that it's not relevant. But above all, we've got to get our own community exercised about it. The people of the District of Columbia, we can't have others more exercised about it than are we. And as we point out, the reason that people don't even bother to care about it is they don't even know about it, and they won't know about it unless we make it an issue. I think we ought to shut down 14th Street Bridge until we get statehood, or do something bold and direct, because it's so fundamental, as reflected by what happened again last week, where the mayor, you have to go to the president. We have a president who's practically treasonous in his behavior. So that's who you go to get to summon the National Guard, your National Guard, to protect your citizens, and for that matter, possibly help protect the citadel of democracy, the Congress. You can't do it. So all of it is just an absurdity. And so that absurdity needs to be called into question, and to call it into question effectively, we the people of the District of Columbia, we the American citizens that we are, need to be exercised about it. And I think hopefully we have an environment now where we can possibly summon that spirit.
It's hard. It's going to be hard to follow that one up. Does anyone else on the panel want to try to follow that up? It's that's following a preacher at the pulpit. That's pretty eloquent. Pretty well said, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Let me try. So as I hear Mayor Pratt, and I agree with her 1,000%, and I will confess, it's been difficult to watch over the years how difficult it has been to get people energized around this topic, quite frankly. But as I think about the students that I teach at Howard University who come from around the country in my political parties course or my presidency course or my national government course, it is a reflection of what I consider to be sort of a national level problem with civic ignorance. That is to say, we have lots of people around the country who do not understand many of the basics, and while there are some people around the country, as Mayor Pratt rightly noted, who will tell you this isn't an important issue, it really does cut to the fundamental core of who we are as a country, taxation without representation. And so I think, we do have some tools in our toolbox that we didn't have a generation ago, primarily through social media. And so we need to use it as judiciously as possible to get the message out and use whatever other tools we have at our disposal to help explain to people what this is really all about. And as I indicated earlier, I think reasonable people will get it.
That's great. Thank you. Can I switch topics real quick and kind of keep on the same topic? Mayor Pratt, you mentioned progressive and a progressive movement. One of the things that we saw, so we're going to keep this relatively local, but one of the things that we just saw through this last election was in apparent, and I say apparent as it was viewed by me, divide between the progressives and the moderates, per se. With more progressive ideals in DC government, what are some ways that elected officials can bridge those ideological divides, even within what is a highly democratic city, right? So, well, it's a democratic city, but the progressives and the moderate divisions, is that a problem? And if it is, how can that be, resolved?
I don't think it's a problem. I mean, governing, which is always so very different than advocating, is inevitably, having to accommodate many points of view, as long as those points of view are within the sphere of the principles of country, the basic principles of the District of Columbia. So, sometimes being progressive, does work. Well, there are inevitably going to be tensions with what are the vested interests. And we do need those vested interests, because they often express the base of revenue for the District of Columbia, as it does for any entity. So there are going to be tensions, but as long as we can reconcile those tensions, not always not everybody's going to be satisfied, but but that's the beauty of our system. I mean, that is what is being frankly challenged right now. The notion of trying to accommodate all points of view and respect all points of view, there's less and less of a tolerance for it. Now, some of that is a function of living in a world where you have so many platforms. We don't have to listen to each other. At one time, we had to listen to each other because we only had a few platforms. But now you can just go into your own echo chamber and don't ever have to listen to the other person or any other point of view. And that's part of what we're seeing. We're having to figure out how to marry different interests and bridge different interests. And you know, it's not inconceivable that we'll have something in the way of approximating almost like a war before we get there. I mean, because we're so in our own lanes now, in our own silos now. The District of Columbia, by comparison to where we are as a country, is doing all right. You know, I mean, we have our tensions, we have our irritations, but by and large, we have a shared regard and respect for one another. And you know, it may be a little frustrating at times, but I think that by and large, we still have regard for that process.
Great, thanks. Mr. Miller, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you know, the landscape in DC is unique in and of itself, but it's certainly not as fractured and as deeply partisan as what we see in some of our other jurisdictions nearby and those far away. You know, I will say that ultimately, the council in particular has just a basic responsibility of being responsive to its constituents in its respective wards. I think there will be greater emphasis on the council really delivering things for city residents. I think when you talk with people about police reform, when you talk with them about economic needs, specifically for restaurants and other businesses that have been hit hard by the pandemic, these are things that they're expecting to get some additional support from the city council and the mayor's office. And so I think for them in particular, they really do have a lot on their plate in trying to meet those needs, because the need is great. And it seems like there is not enough support. I think we need to kind of figure out what that looks like from an economic perspective, kind of just a perspective of presence. And I think when it comes to police reform, I think DC residents, as well as organizations like Black Lives Matter DC, are going to be very adamant about making sure that there's some sort of substantive, real, long-term police reform in the city. Given what we saw over the summer, those groups continue to be and should be charged up and committed to their causes. And when you talk with them and you have these conversations, they're very clear that some of the things that the council has done on a temporary basis, while okay, to simply just not go far enough and trying to address the systemic issue, both within the police department and in the city itself.
Great, thanks.
Could I comment?
Yeah.
Try to add something to that. As much as I love my city and want us to excel and reach all of our possibilities, I am also a globalist. When I say that, I mean, I look beyond this city because it is a part of this country. And when we talk about the whole factions within the Democratic Party, and we talk about the liberals versus the progressives, and I said before that sometimes tragedies hit us in personal lives and also collectively as a nation. Those can be times of opportunity or teachable moments. And one of the things I've been thinking about, and I've been speaking with a few people about this on our seminar, not talking from anybody being an expert, but when we talk about what is happening to this country in terms of its disparity, in terms of what are we going to do to get, they can call it stimulus, I call it a survival package. How are we going to get out of this situation we're in? The district cannot be excluded from that movement. We cannot be excluded from that revolution, because that's what it's going to take. We were caught up in a bunch of folks that who want to destroy this country, but they had an impact on us. This virus is going around, how we're distributing the vaccines. We're in the world, just like this country is in the world. We needed to get the nationalist thinking out of here, because we are part of a world community. What happens outside also impacts us. So when we talk about progressives and we allow for these voices to come out to talk about socialism, Most of them have no idea what socialism is. And even when you throw things out like Social Security, Medicare, they want to turn that into an entitlement. And so what we have to do is be clear in what we want, be clear in our demands from our leaders, whether they be local or whether they be national. And too often, we have thought our only role is to register and vote. But I tell you, if we don't have a mind change that we're going to keep folks accountable, then what will happen is we will be still talking about moving forward. And there has to be more demands from us rather than asking or hoping. After all, we are the people that put them into power. I think we minimize our power as far as that vote.
So Phil, with that being said, let me ask you another question, and
Okay.
John would like for you to answer the question as well. When we talk about black vote, the minority vote,
Mhm.
was, and going back to Georgia as well,
Yeah.
was very instrumental in flipping the state. So while the black vote, minority vote has been the backbone of the Democratic Party,
Mhm.
we haven't always reaped the benefits. So what can the Democratic Party do to ensure that they're delivering on promises for black and brown voters?
Okay.
Phil, John, would love to hear from the two of you around this.
Okay. The number of people that use the ballot box determine in many ways whether you're heard. We can just look at our own city. And I don't know if I have correct figures, but this is what I pulled off the internet, and it was from the election board. And real quickly, in our primary earlier last year, we had 410,260 registered voters. Guess how many cast a vote? 114,890. That equaled 28%. And I'm saying that to say, if we don't motivate, educate, roll up our sleeves. I'm a foot soldier. I mean, I make no bones about it. You'll never hear me in the news. I'm a foot soldier. And my commitment is to do all I can to help educate this next generation and even folks that are interested to just become knowledgeable of the power of the vote, even down to a simple thing like what are the powers of the president? This is part of what our seminar. How long does a senator serve? Do you know your congressperson? Do you just drive down the medium strip during election time and see a person's face and they're smiling and you keep seeing that face day after day and that determines who you're going to vote for when you go in the ballot box? If that is the case, that has to change. And we have to care enough about all of our voters. We have to care about them. We can't just say, oh, yeah, we're going to do this for Ward 8 or Ward 7. We have to have compassion for all of our citizens. And part of that compassion is to educate. And where the vote is concerned, we have got to lift up our percentage of participation because it translates into power. Why do you think these Republicans right now are tearing this country up? They're
Right,
tearing it
right.
up because of that vote.
Absolutely,
So we
absolutely.
have all kinds of power. And then once we get that power, then we demand. We demand. This is what we expect. Because if we don't get it, hey, we can look elsewhere.
Absolutely,
This is a tough
absolutely.
ball game. This is not touch football. This is tackle.
There we go. Thank you, Phil. John.
I think he, just hit right on the head. Listening. I know that I was able to move the most people in my work and community organizing in my hometown because we knew what they cared about. They were tired of their cars getting towed by the police and having to pay $3,000 to get them back. Or they were tired of paying, a 70% charge on their water bills. And so that listening portion, I think, is super important, but also being able to make them feel like they're being listened to. We need to be talking about the things that hit our pocketbooks, hit our home, that are the discussions at the kitchen table. That is how, that's how people are moved. They're moved by their self-interest and being able to see a benefit for themselves in moving a certain way. But they're also scared historically. In some other places across the country, when you're talking about particularly Latino and Central and South American Latino votes, they have a different philosophy and different mindset given their experience in politics. So you would have people that even the word socialism is a detractor. But I think that those are also distractions too. You use very well. And within our party and within the Democratic Party, because we are so diverse, there's an inherent problem in fractionalization between what we're saying and how we're saying it because of this uniqueness. So build it back better. It sounds simple, and I don't think it's to be condescending in the way that we communicate or that we have to necessarily dumb things down. We really need to be understanding, what are the impacts of COVID-19 in Los Angeles and DC and how it affects our people in the community, and talking about solutions that are gonna help them survive through it and what they can be looking forward to better their lives as the outcome. And I think that's the nature of politics and nature of political communication, is to be able to create an idea that people can get behind and move forward. And that's the only way that we're really going to get to our folks. The other side is actual money, spending money in advertisement to be able to make sure that folks understand what is at stake. But a unified message is also very important within that.
Dr. Fontroy, do you want to make any comments on this?
No, I'll wait for the next one.
So I was going to save this for last because it's not necessarily contentious, but it can maybe take a while to sort through some of the opinions. Sam and Bree had made some comments in here and in the chat. But one of the things that we've been talking about here locally and nationally is ranked choice voting, and whether that's something that should be considered, something that should be explored further, something that should, right? There's lots of some things. Mayor Pratt, can we start with you and give your maybe opinion? I don't necessarily know if we need to have a pros and cons, but if you don't mind just sharing maybe your view on if that's something that we should explore or not. I apologize, Mayor.
You're on mute. There you go.
Mayor, can you repeat yourself? You were on mute before.
Okay. I said I haven't thought about it enough to really, provide something really thoughtful. So I think I'm not the right person to start on that one.
I'll jump in if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, I think we got John, and then I think we got Mr. Rodriguez and Dr. Fontroy, I think was going to go next. So,
yeah, in terms of ranked choice voting, it's something that's being used, in a lot of progressive places around the country. San Francisco uses this practice to be able to create a little bit more parity and opportunity for challengers to establishment political powers. And in places where you have a dominant party, it allows for a little bit more equitability and access to leadership. I think if we're looking at that as a possibility, we also have to revisit the public financing, because that also creates another compounding element in terms of how ranked choice voting would work with all these people getting into the mix. So there's kind of two things there that we should be looking at. But definitely for, you know, even if you were to look at the numbers for, let's say we wanted to elect a Latino council member to the district, which has never happened before. The likelihood, looking at the statistics and the numbers, not very high. You know, all the Latino members who, candidates who ran in the at-large race didn't amount to a winning number collectively. If we were to make that kind of assumption that they garnered a lot of the Latino vote, it's definitely something that should be proposed in the essence of creating a little bit more balance in terms of the political field and people being able to rise to leadership that are representative of community.
Yeah. So I really like ranked choice voting for a number of reasons too, which I want to mention here. One is turnout, right? So Mr. Portlock mentioned earlier the low turnout in primary elections. That is something that's a problem around the country. And it's particularly a problem in jurisdictions in which special elections and primary elections are held in odd times of the year. Some of you may recall the name former city council member David Catania. I use him as an example of how the date in which a special election is held can often help explain who wins and who doesn't. When he won his first seat in 98, I think, is that correct? The special election was held in December, right around the time when people were thinking about a bunch of other things. And the turnout was 7%, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So just keep that in mind, right? So ranked choice is great because it helps to reduce the number of specials that need to occur, right? So that's one piece. The other piece is just sort of a public expenditure administration standpoint. Fewer elections means less money that needs to be spent to administer the elections, right? Which are dollars that can then be allocated to other things. And so, and then lastly, just quickly, in addition to progressive places like San Francisco, ranked choice was used for the first time this last November in Maine. And there are other parts around the country where ranked choice is beginning to gain some traction. It can be a little complicated earlier for some people, but people get used to it and it begins to make sense. And so I think ranked choice is likely to be the wave of the future. And I think we're going to find a generation from now that people are going to look back on these days and wonder why we didn't do it sooner.
Mr. Miller, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't have any thoughts. Someone just sent me something I thought was funny, but no, I don't really have any thoughts on that. You know, I think I'll be curious to see how it will work in its implementation, if that's something that is kind of like the wave of the future, as some of the other panelists described. But, you know, ultimately, I think voter turnout is kind of an issue I think that the city really should be concentrating on, right? Trying to get more people to the polls to participate in the process and make sure that, you know, things that city residents want, that they get. It seemed like the voter turnout, at least for this past election, was a lot better than what we've seen over the past several years and several elections. But I think the city still has a long way to go in trying to get the type of engagement that I think is warranted.
I want to add to this conversation. I do not have a stance on ranked choice voting yet myself. However, I do know this, and this is something that I've garnered through working with Bob King, a lot of seniors within Ward 5. Ward 5 is home to one of the largest, if not the largest, population of seniors in the city, right? So we do RCV, and again, I want to make sure this is a recording. I don't have an opinion either way on this yet. But if we do RCV, especially in 2022, I can't see how we would not be disenfranchising thousands upon thousands upon thousands of seniors and those also designated as vulnerable populations, right? Because automatic mail-in ballots is something that the DC Board of Elections was able to do, even though they first said it would take them 10 years, they did it in some months. And I think I like to say that Bob King, Senior COVID-19 Commissioner, and many others here had something to do with that. John knows what I'm talking about, and many others. But I know personally, I went to the senior buildings to register seniors and get them registered for automatic mail-in ballots. I mean, it was the educational curve. And I mean, seniors are smart, but nevertheless, technology is something that, I even have trouble with. So with that being said, what about the seniors? They are, I think, 16% of the population in the District of Columbia. What's going to happen with them, especially in 2022?
So I would just say a couple of things to that. First, any change in the way elections are administered have to come with a significant commitment of resources to public education, a civic education campaign, and I think any change, at least in the initial period in which it is rolled out, is going to have more bumps than it will at some point down the line. So I think, as with all new technology and all changes, people get more comfortable with it, the better it works for them. But at some point, if you're going to commit to something, you got to make sure that you do all that's necessary to make it work.
I'd like to piggyback on that too. That's exactly the point in terms of being able to educate the community, but also have the services and resources that are needed to be able to carry out the mission. I think what we'll also see is opposition to the initiative by people who have a vested interest in local politics in DC that might fear that their power can be diminished. And so, in terms of making this something real, looking at the political dynamic, that it will see some opposition, but just like we started out this election cycle, nobody foresaw it being impacted by COVID-19 in this way. I mean, overnight, our capacities for presidential elections on down has changed, but also in the way that we vote, how many people voted. That also was a big challenge. But they are all things that if we are really interested in making the kind of change that we believe is necessary to bring this kind of equitable and opportunity to really cast a vote that matters, we have to do the things that are going to be hard, for sure. And I believe that it is possible to do, given the technology and how we've been able to see kind of a dramatic change in the way we do business, communicate, educate, and you name it.
And I just wanted to mention something, Brother Rodriguez, you said something about money. Yeah, money does become critical. And I know I've been focused on Citizens United since 2010. That was one of the worst court decisions that we have ever experienced. And for those of you that may not be familiar with it, it simply said that corporations, unions can be treated as individuals, and their First Amendment rights can be heard just like you and I, which means that they can contribute unlimited amounts of money without any identification of where it comes from. In 2014, they added McCutcheon to that. That now allowed for individuals to just give gobs of money. So until we're able to break down that system the way it exists now because our elections are being bought by the biggest spender. That has impact on all of us. Now I know the district, I'm proud of my hometown that did this fair election. You know, that's a step forward. But until this money thing can be resolved where that's not the determining factor on who leads a city, who leads a country, who leads a territory, then we're going to be struggling to get the limited resources to the candidates that we want. So we have a big job ahead of us, but it's not insurmountable. We can do this, but we just have to stay on the case. If we continue to vote and we lose maybe a couple of lose Clarence Thomas or somebody else off of that Supreme Court, we can only do that if we continue to put in Democrats. So it's a long range thing, but it can happen. But in the meantime, Dr. Fauntleroy, we still should be looking at other alternatives that we may never have thought about, because we're being forced now into, look what's happening to the Republican Party. They're ready to dissolve. Now, I don't want them to be today on the ground struggling, eating each other like cannibals, and then they get their act together, and then we don't learn from that, and then we be in the same situation where we will have Democrats and independents. This may sound facetious, but these things can happen overnight. And so we just have to remain vigilant, and these laws that hinder us from doing what we should be able to do automatically as American citizens, we just have to stay on top of it.
Mr. Portlock, if I can say one thing, I think you do bring up an interesting point, but I would also kind of push back on that regarding the issue of money. The fact of the matter is that previous campaigns have shown us that even though some candidates are significantly outspending others, that social media, a strong ground game, tends to be the great equalizer in all of this. I mean, kind of taking Hillary Clinton's campaign, for example, she outspent President Trump 2-1. And we're also talking about other local elections too, where candidates that were losing were typically the ones spending the most money. So, I'm not sure if the issue of money is as much of a deterrent as you would suggest, considering that technology has made it a lot easier for candidates to get their message out there and to really meet voters where they are.
Okay, I agree with you, brother Miller. I agree with you 100%. But Citizens United and McCutcheon, they are unfair laws. Those laws should not exist. I'm not saying that you have occasions where with social media, you had that up in Brooklyn, where you had Joe Crowley, who was fourth in line in the Democratic Party, and he ended up losing. And then we had Elliot. I'm thinking of it, Elliot. Engel. Yes, he had the money, and I agree with you. The people who ran against them didn't have as much, but they had social media. But we don't know whether social media is going to be the avenue that it has been. That could change overnight, especially what we're seeing now. Because a lot of these
certainly on issues, I'd say I agree with you. I think on issues,
yes,
such as gun control and climate change,
yes,
in spite of where the numbers are in terms of general polling, because of how major interest being able to pour money into issues around the Second Amendment, the issues around where we've become a country that was known because we put the man on the moon. We're the country that built the automobile. We're the country with Silicon Valley, and now we're a country that's against science. That's right. And a lot of that is because of strong public information campaigns that have worked against climate change, for example, that have worked against issues around gun control. That's another topic. But so I think you Citizens United, that's where you see the power of what they've done in a way that's quite negative, I think. Well, I'm a Democrat.
Well, I think there's an issue too with passivity, right? I mean, what Democrats do not do well is the messaging campaign consistently. And I think when you look at what President Trump has been able to do well during the 4 years, his 4 years in office, is that it is very simple messages that resonate with people, that they keep repeating to the point at which they believe it, right?
Well,
And
but he didn't, what he did was say things that were so outrageous. I mean, what he did was to coarsen the conversation. I mean, he plays to the underbelly of America.
But
And
it
that's
worked.
why he has power. You know, he plays now. So if we yes, you can beat him if we could figure out, but we don't want to have to go to that underbelly. Now, I don't ignore what you're saying, and I agree with you about consistent messaging, but he has a consistency based upon a lot of training with the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, that's really where he's coming from, in my opinion, the underbelly of America. And therefore, he can ignite. It's tougher when you're trying to bridge differences and you're trying to have a message that bridges differences. It comes off as so empty, and it's not, and it doesn't have the punch until you get hit in the head like we did on January 6th. Now maybe someone can come up with a message that hits and has the power of that, the salacious kinds of conversation that he advances. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that ours is a greater challenge, I think.
I'll concede to your point. Thank you.
Wow. This is where it becomes a shame, where it seems to take a little bit to get rolling, and then once it gets rolling, it's hard to believe that it's about time to end. Jennifer Blemmer offered this question, and I'm afraid, sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, Jennifer, but you offered this question. I was afraid to ask it, and I'm still afraid to ask it because I'm not sure I want to know what the answer is. But it was sort of positing, with all of the disgusting things that happened last week on January 6th, it leaves us with the question, despite the fact that his presidency is ending, is this the end of Donald Trump? Or is he around himself and or obviously a likeness of him? And so I want to open that, Mayor, if you don't mind just starting kind of your opinion on that.
I do not think it's the end of him. I mean, he's only the manic expression and embodiment of an energy that exists in America. Now, I don't know that it would have coalesced and taken on the force that it did unless it had this vehicle or vessel called Donald Trump. But obviously you have people like Hawley. I mean, this is a man who is a Supreme Court justice. A justice clerk. So he obviously should know the Constitution. And yet he just, tosses all of that training out the window and has embraced where you have in the wake of somebody overtaking the Capitol, 147 Republicans that actually still voted against what Americans voted for in the electoral vote. That's extraordinary. So no, I don't think it's over with Donald Trump. I think we've got a problem. We've got a reckoning here in America.
Great, thanks. Dr. Fountroy?
Yeah, quickly in the interest of time, he is done, but what he represents continues to live, will continue to live because it has always lived. He didn't come out of nowhere. He has a lot of people who provide the wind behind his sail, and that wind will continue to blow even though he's no longer the ship captain.
And this is Phil, real quickly, I just wanted to say the media holds a lot of the answers in their hands. If they continue to follow this man on a daily basis, 24/7, then that can be a problem too. And I plan to boycott those stations that treat him as if he's still in office, because they have a tendency with the corporate media, news is money. And they, I just, and the other thing, I'm kind of happy that Trump is a narrow-minded human being, because he could have been a Josh Hawley, an educated man, a slickster, but knew what he was doing. So in that respect, when he goes off the scene, he'll be off the scene. He'll still be present. We have to worry about whether we still think about him every day. And I hope we don't.
I think what it will come down to is whether the Senate takes up the vote or not in terms of, whether his political future will live. And depending on whether they move that on that quickly or they wait until we have a new president, Mr. Biden, that's where the pickle is. I think it's important to move hastily and use the energy of now to really force some of these senators to either vote their conscience or at least then the idea of purging the party. But it was always there is exactly the right thing to say. I think I felt it all my life, growing up in Palm Springs, California. And, even when I go to Tacoma Park, you can still feel that wind. And I think that it's kind of a blessing and a curse that he's been able to show us, or at least remove the mask. But it wasn't until now that we've actually classified some of these things as hate. I always thought it was a hate crime to be called derogatories and felt uncomfortable, or I was going to, as I'm going to be harmed. And I think that the more that we are being able to recognize this, we're pushing kind of where we should be, and where those things are unacceptable, whether they're in a House of Congress, outside of Congress, in a church, or what have you. But having said that, that being always there, we also need to understand how to talk to the other side past now. Right now, we have to defend ourselves and to be vigilant and but past now is when we have to be looking at how do we talk to folks. They've always used this wind, just not as pervasive, without a flag. And now they think and they feel comfortable to wave this flag. And we have to use this opportunity to show them that that is unacceptable. It's not about politics, but rather what's right in a society of human beings.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, are we done with President Trump? I certainly don't think so. I think you will just see kind of like a different version of him. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we've been talking about Trump for decades, and he is a larger than life personality, and he has a way of being available and open with the media and the public in ways that our elected officials are not. And so I strongly doubt that he's going away. You will see him, but just in a different form.
Yeah, there was an interesting poll that came out today, I think, that talked about the 2024 frontrunner, or who would you vote for? And I think 40% still put Donald Trump as their top, with 18%, I think, going to Pence. So it'll be interesting to see where that lies in the future. Goodness, I can't believe the time went so fast. I would like to give an opportunity for the panelists to say some closing words if they'd like. Really, I can't say enough how much I appreciated everyone's time and how generous you were to share your evening with us. But so, Mayor Pratt, if you want to start and say a few closing words.
Yes, I'm going to peel away, but I'm very delighted to have been a part of tonight's conversation. And it's terrific to see all of this energy and spirited dialogue and conversation, and a lot of mature political thinking. It's very heartening for me, who's been a lifelong, Washington resident and always involved in, even before we had politics in Washington. So thank you for making me allowing me to be a part of it. And I'm very encouraged by the leadership that I've witnessed here tonight. So kudos to you.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Fontroy?
Yes, thank you. I too want to thank you all for organizing this event. The pandemic has created some opportunities and challenges for us all, and thankfully we still have ways to get together and talk about important things. And I'm really glad this is being recorded for others who can check it out at some subsequent point. I just want to encourage the Ward 5 Democrats to keep up the great work. We need more civic engagement, not less. We need more pressure put on elected officials, not less. And as I indicated at the start, I'm always happy to join my home ward.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. I feel very humbled and honored to be with all of you, and also to, be able to share my brain. I think one thing that I would like to reflect on that's DC centric as we leave here to think about for future is how we might change, given our experience, the public financing in Washington, DC, given the number of candidates, but also some of the constraints it puts on the candidates who would decide to partake in the interest of being able to create this opportunity for all to have leadership. So I'd leave that there for perhaps a future conversation. But I'm very thankful to have the excuse to dress up and to be with all of you this evening and to share my thoughts. I'd welcome an opportunity to be back.
Great, thank you so much. There were a couple other questions that I know I had for you that unfortunately we didn't get to, particularly in light of campaigning. But maybe a future event might be in order, because we definitely would like to hear some more from you. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the panel. Thank you to the organizers. I'm a person that believes very much in optimism. And, I certainly believe, even though 2021 has gotten off to a bit of a rough start, that things will eventually get a little bit better. So thanks.
Thanks for the optimism.
Yeah.
Mr. Portlock.
I want to just thank you for the invite, and I was honored just to be here tonight amongst each of you. And in my closing, I just want to share the fact that we are going to continue doing our voter education seminars. It's a Zoom setup, and we would love to have you all join us. And we'll find some way. We haven't started back up, but we're going to take this thing all through 2022. As long as I'm able to do it, it's going to be available. And I just need to find a way to contact. I mean, I can put up my website, and I'm going to have some finished in building that. So would love to have you. And that's a film that we show the film, Voting Rights, The Struggle to Be Counted, which traces the long and brutal struggle by our people to gain the right to vote. Let me say again, the unrestricted right to vote, because we still are dealing with renewal and all this other stuff. So, we would love for you to join us at one of our sessions.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Great.
Phil, I just want to say that any information, anytime you have those seminars, please get it over to John, Sean, and myself and Emily, and we'll get that information out through the Ward 5 Democrats MailChimp, because we want to continue to support you and your work. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much, and we'll do.
Real quick, I do want to say thank you to Linda Jefferson for really helping kind of organize some of this with Mayor Pratt. But as is tradition here in the Ward 5 Democrats and any event that we host, the final word often goes to Hazel Thomas, who, if we like to we give this honor to her, because if not, she takes it. And,
nothing's changed.
So Hazel, if you'd like to say a few words, I know you had a question in the chat, and actually, if you don't mind just asking that question to the panelists, or to Mayor Pratt in particular, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Wait, John and Hazel, hold on, because I want to follow through what John said and make sure Hazel gets the last word, because I don't want to go after her. I also want to make sure I say thank you to Linda Jefferson, Hazel Thomas, and also the entire DC Federation of Democratic Women. The Ward 5 Democrats and DC Federation of Democratic Women have had a continuous, amazing relationship. And I just appreciate the fact that we're continuing to do this through this administration. Jeanette Mobley was a past chair. She was an amazing, strong Black woman. And we are continuing to support her, and she's continuing to support us. And so I just want to say thank you to Jeanette, because she's the president of that. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can't say it enough. So with that being said, Hazel definitely gets the final word.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Hazel's off. So I guess
Oh.
who's out tonight?
Oh, okay. Linda, do you want to speak in Hazel's stead?
I'm surprised that Hazel was on, so I'm not sure what happened. But I just want to thank you, Gordon, and the leadership of Ward 5 Dems for our relationship, for us, our partnership, the DC Federation of Democratic Women. Thank you, Mayor Kelly, Mayor Pratt, and thank all the panelists. I've definitely learned some things tonight, and I think it's been a very good discussion and workshop. Thank you again.
Linda.
Yes.
All right, well then, I think we're.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All
Have a
right.
wonderful
Okay.
night. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
All right,
You
All
too.
right.